Let's make some vintage buttons. Hello and welcome to the Treasured Page. I'm Melanie and this is our quiet crafting space. This is a space to come and relax, a time for you, a time to just have a look at the things that you have in your craft supplies and see if we can't just make something from nothing today. What I've got in front of me is some packaging. I've got an old cereal packet. So this has been taken from a box and it is just a good thickness. It's quite a good thickness. We're going to be making buttons from material such as that, so you need to grab some packaging. Could be old cracker box, could be anything really. Nothing too thick and nothing too thin. I've got a greeting card here. This is quite thin, but it has a texture on it and I quite like the fact that it's light coloured, so I'm probably going to use that. I don't know if I can show you the texture. And it's got a texture to it. I don't know if that's... I think you can see that. It's sort of quite a interesting sort of linen effect, and this is a charity card because these paintings have been made by people using their mouths. So this is the mouth and foot painting artists, and I've got two of these, and these were birthday cards. So one was for my husband, one was for me, and we are now recycling them. So I want to keep the picture and that will go into journals because they're lovely, and then this back portion here I will recycle into buttons. That's the plan. We're going to need some ink. We're going to choose different colours. If we're going to make the blue ones, then you'll need blue ink. You could use a felt tip pen, anything that gives you a stain, and it could be paint. Let's just go with the technique and you can figure out how you would like to colour your buttons. You may not want something as vibrant as that, but I'm just doing that because they show up nicely on that card. But what we'll do is we'll make some loose buttons, and then from there we'll have some embellishments to put on other things. So I had a little washi tape button there that was very thin, just one thickness, and I also made this very thin button here. And sometimes it's really nice to just have one thickness of card and then for it to just come and live on a cluster. Keep the whole thing thin but give the appeal or the look of a button without bringing bulk. So you can choose whether you want to have the thin buttons. This was made using a 3D effect glaze over the top of it, which has now dried, so it adds dimensional detail. That's Nouveau drops, that's the crystal drops, so it dries clear. Right, let's tackle this project. So I'm going to remove the picture portion of that card. I'm going to keep that. That will go into a journal, and I just want to keep the white textured part of that card there. So these are the hole punches that I'm using. I use these, they're lovely and flat for storage. They are by a company called EK, they're an American brand, and I am going to be using the 1 inch, if I can get them around the right way, 1 inch and 3/4 inch, and that's what we had here. Okay, when we're making our buttons we can layer them up and we can build up the layers of the circles. So we're just going to cut out some circles like that, and then we've got, I need one more. Okay, so that's going to be fine. I think what I must have done 3 layers. So we'll do, we better do 4. So we just go round cutting out your circles like that, and I'm going to do some here as well. So these are going to be the top of my... Alright, so I'm making 4 buttons, so I want 2 of my packaging card for each button, so that's going to be my 4 buttons, and then on top is going to be this textured look like that. So that is 2 layers plus that top card, which is ever so slightly thinner, so that's a layer of 3 like that. So these are still flat, but they're going to wind up being quite substantial and have a nice feel to them. We want them to feel like buttons, but sometimes it's also nice to keep them thin so that they look good on a project. You can play around with how thick you would like your buttons. It's nice to keep it just one thickness and have that as an embellished topper onto a cluster or just a page, anything really. It's just got a lovely feel to it where it's been coated in that top varnish, and you could do that using a clear nail polish. You could use something like a PVA glue, would still give you that effect. You don't need to have all the special things, just use what you may have to hand, what you can get your hands on without costing a fortune. Alright, so I'm using a wet glue here, so this is just something, give it a little bit of grab. If you have a very strong stick glue and you know it to really grab hold of paper and do an excellent job, then by all means use that. I'm using a wet glue here. This is the Art Glitter glue, only because it's just quite nice to be able to use that precision nib and be able to get round there. Bit of a messy one, but fun to piece them all together. You could use a silicone glue. Okay, with this we're going to get a little bit of glue seeping out the sides. You actually want that. You really want to smear that around and that to be the filler of the join if you can. If you have a sensitivity to glue or anything like that, then absolutely use gloves for this, or you could just roll it on a tissue and just try and smooth that glue into the cracks so that it becomes a little bit sealed all the way round. So we've got two, so that's great. When I'm putting them together, I'm putting the printed side together so that it's a nicer finish on the outside. We were not going to see it, but it just looks nice as we go. Lots of ways to make buttons, and you can put acrylic gel over the top of them with, if anyone's familiar with resin, you could have something like a UV resin could go on them, and you could really make them look authentic and really quite effective, and just come from cardboard. So we're just using a runny glue because it just helps to give a really good seal all the way around. Okay, so we do that. When we've done that, we can now start with the top layer and put on the white top pieces. This could be any paper, maybe a thick paper, like maybe a very thin card. This could be anything you like. This could be embossed paper, something with a texture or not. I'm going with a white base because it's going to give more depth to my colour that I'm wanting to put on. There we go. That's got a nice texture to it, so I'm just keen to see how they come out. So those are my 4 buttons coming together there now. The next thing to do is take my white paper and to take the smaller of the 2 punches, so this is the 3/4 inch one, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to want 4, so I've got to punch a hole but leave a border. So there's already a border around here, so I'm just going to line it up with the top edge there and maybe come in a bit. Whee! And just come down and do that. I don't need those circles, but they will become future buttons and smaller ones. And then I'll come over here with this one and put that to one side. The next thing to do is get the 1 inch and come over where you've been before and just line it up in the middle, eyeball it, just see if you can get that double circle, and that's how it's done. So you get that shape there, and that comes onto the top of the button and gives you a little bit of depth. This one, because it's not very thick card, isn't going to be as bold as that one, but they'll be subtle and they will still be very nice. So we'll just keep going. And if you go wonky, if you slip, that's fine. It adds to the handmade character of the button and will just be fun. Okay, so we've got our little hula hoops, and we put those on the top. And because this is textured paper, so I'm making sure that the textured side stays up. Alright, and then just allowing the glue to seep out, that's fine. And you just repeat the process for all 4 buttons. Or however many buttons you'd like to do. You can sit here and punch out lots. You can deliberately off-center that and create an interesting effect. Your buttons will look really fun if you make it look meant. So we have these fun buttons looking like that so far without their holes in, but that is the start of how we've got this going on. The next thing to do would be to punch the holes in, and then we'll go about adding the colour. There are many ways in which we can punch holes into the buttons. We're now looking at 3 layers thick in the centre, and then the loop around the top makes 4, so it looks thicker on the edge than it does in the middle. And how I tackle it is either using the awl or a pokey tool or a very thick needle or an ice pick. You can get a raised bump on the back of that, so that's something to consider. If you've got a Japanese punching tool, any kind of tool that allows you to punch into something that's small enough, then by all means you can use that. I have a jewellery punch tool here. I can't actually remember where I've got it from. I've had it so long. I think it came from a company called Beads, and it was a very inexpensive tool, and it just has a little hole there and allows that sharp point to poke through, and then what it does is it clamps it shut and you are able to avoid getting the raised surface. So you can either use something like this and go for it. But what's happened here is I've squashed the side of my outer ring, so that's not really going to work. So what we're going to want to do is just, I think simply, is just use the awl. So to avoid squashing the outer rim, I'm going to use my awl tool, and I'm going to just line them up and just poke through onto a soft surface here. So I've just got some old blanket that's rolled up, and then I do get raised bits at the back, but you could sand those off. That's it. And then just go round, and I'm just making them a bit wider, emphasising them, putting the awl in and just pushing it down, wiggling that down to make the buttonholes a little wider. And if you want to sand off the raised bits at the back, it's quite a simple process. It may be easier to just push something there to hold them, and then you just take that raised crushed cardboard away. It's always useful to have a bit of sandpaper around. There's lots of uses for it. It's just another thing. You think, oh yes, I could just smooth the edge of that, or I could just rough the edge of it up. So you could, so with your sandpaper, you could just smooth the edges round. You could go round like that. But if you've hand punched them, they should already be pretty good. And then from here, it's all about the colour. I'm now left with a brown edge. So what I'm going to do is I've got a liquid chalk pen here. You could use a Posca pen, something similar, and be able to go round and just whiten the edge with something that will grab onto paint. So I'm going to use the liquid chalk pen here. I'm just going round. You could use gesso with a paintbrush and just go round and just make sure that you've got that white edge. You want to use something like a paint, like a chalk paint or a gesso, or anything that will give you the grab when you want to put colour on. So you don't want a resist, you want to, so not an acrylic paint, you want something with a little bit of tooth to it, a grab to it. That's why this liquid chalk paint pen is useful. and I'm just applying it on there, but correcting fluid would be perfect, and also white gel pen would work nicely as well. Whatever you've got, something to just seal the edges in. So moving over now to the messy area of the desk, I'm just going to put that on there, that colour all the way around, and then that just covers that. They also dry really quickly, so we can just carry on. I've got my blue ink here, and I might go for a yellow as well. I've got blue ink here. I'm probably going to do 2 different colours just to show you, and I'm going to use my ink pad here and just put on some colour like that. Very straightforward. You can really see that colour going on, and you can build it up to the strength or depth of colour that you like, and then you go around the edges. So that's one way of colouring the buttons using our normal ink. Another way would be to use felt tip pens or alcohol ink markers. I'm going to go with this yellow on here using the wider nib and just go around putting the colour on there. This is a nice sunshine yellow, I think it's called. I think this one was sunflower yellow. So just put that on there. I've got fossilised amber here. I'm going to just go around the edges with this. I don't want to damage the edges of my alcohol ink marker. I just want to make sure that this has got a yellow tone all the way around so that I can have the buttons the way I want them. And I'll just come in again with this. So we've got some very bright primary colour buttons here, and then if we want to bring them a little bit more into a vintage feel, then over the top we can add an embossing glaze, or we could come in with our Nouveau Crystal drops, and what you could even do is squirt some into a dish, maybe colour it, dampen it down with a bit of coffee and give that aged effect to your Nouveau drops, and then paint that on and leave it overnight to dry. You could do that. What I'm going to use is my embossing glazes. I've got fossilised amber for the yellow, and then for this colour over here I'm going to use salvage patina, and I may come back and do a speckled egg colour. These are just glazes, they're not solid colours with the Distress range. They just add that depth and antiquing effect. So I'm going to do that. If your buttons are still wet with ink enough, you may find the powder sticks really well to the button and that you can get away without having to use any kind of embossing pad. It hasn't done around the edge, but we always have to do several coats of this anyway, so it's quite good to just get it started. So I'm just putting it directly into the pot, tapping off the excess, and then I'm going to get the heat gun and blow that, and I think I'll do the same for this one over here. So we'll just put a bit of ink on here to make sure that that's at least a little bit damp, and then put this into the embossing powder just like that. We really want to build up with just a few light coats, so we don't want a great big clump of it if it can be helped. I'm just now going to blast them with this heat gun. So this is the first coat now dried. At this point you can check your holes, you can push your awl in a little bit better, you can make the holes wider. You don't want them to have closed up with the embossing glaze, so you can just emphasize those holes now by opening them back up again. For the second coat, if you've used embossing before, you will probably have something like this, a embossing pad. you want to get your embossing pad, and then you just want to make sure you roll it over the edges and get the edges covered in the sticky ink, and again just push it down. We won't be marking the ink pad with the ink here now because it's already been sealed in with the top coat, so we're just rolling it over the ink pad to get those edges dealt with, and the same with the blue. And then it's up to you. If you have other colours, you could put a different colour over the top. So for this, we might like to age it a bit further with an antique linen glaze over the top of the yellow buttons. And I think I might go in with the speckled egg colour here. And I think I might get away with it going into the pot so that I can get the all the way around the sides. That's looking pretty good, so we'll just put that one down. Same with this one. Straight in the pot, nice and easy. And again, straight in the pot using the tweezers, nice and easy, and able to get those out. Okay, there we go. And then just go over them again with the heat gun. All right, here we have them. So from some very humble beginnings to some really rather authentic looking buttons in some vibrant colours, which can then come in and look amazing in your journal. And lovely to be able to do something like that, a bit of vintage charm if you wanted to do anything from the 1940s, 50s and 60s. This would be a really fun way to use the vibrant colours. They look great on any kind of cluster or project, anything that you want to embellish, and just the fact that they're a little bit wonky makes them almost look like they're ceramic buttons or something. Very modern, actually, very fun, and totally great to have as a dangle to be swinging off of some cotton, and then to come and live and be something that maybe hangs out of the bottom of your journal if you were doing a sewing journal or something relating to sewing, stitching, crafting, make, do and mend, anything like that. Buttons are always fun in a journal. I don't really mind where I have a button as long as I have a button, and I just think that adds something. I love them, and you could go on and on and on. The colours are endless. We could have purple ones, pink ones, navy blue ones. We could go for white ones. You're just limited by how, you know, what your glaze is. You could just have something darker in the background, then come over the top with a lighter colour. Vice versa, the glazes are just to be played with. So if you are going to get some glazes, then I do recommend these ones. They are lovely, and the antique linen just brings that aged effect. It really does. And the speckled egg gives a nice texture on there. So let's see if we can see them there. I think probably we could have gone round another layer on the edge of that one if I'm going to be really fussy about it, but just so that you can understand the technique and how to do it. That's how I'm tackling my project this month, which is to create buttons made of paper or card, and then to do something with them. And what I'm going to do is add them to button cards, and just for a bit of fun, I've got this free digital download of button cards, which you can download from my coffee shop. The link is below, and I will just see if I can put the buttons on here. I've had a few technical difficulties this week, which is why we haven't had the video out as planned. And now the printer has run out of ink, so we've got some funny lines going on this digital, so you won't get that on yours. And then I'm just going to take this card here, and I think we'll just stick this on just to strengthen that up, but that could be printed out onto a thicker cardstock. Take a stick glue, put down our button card, let's line it up with the bottom edge. These are just some inexpensive index cards which I picked up a while ago. They're actually quite thin, but with the thickness of the paper it's just adding a little bit of strength. And it's quite nice to add something to the journal that's got a little bit of strength to it without adding bulk, because when you put the buttons on it they will add a little bit. So they are going to go like that. Ink around here a wee bit. Probably should have done a brown to signify some age. And just put them down where you want them. And the same for this one. Now this is designed to just be a journaling card, a little extra, a fun find. So these are now embellishments that can't be used. They are going to be part of this card. That is just part of the fun of that. And then that looks like that, similar to this. And that's how we do that. Can round the corners. That's lovely. They remind me of something growing up and a wonderful nostalgia. I just think that's really sweet. Looks great in any journals. Quite modern feel, a twist on an old item that we would have loved to have played around with in a button tin somewhere. And then some writing space on the back just for a little note or to stick something extra, just perfect to go into a journal. That's the plan for all of these. So we've got some loose buttons to go in our bag, we've got some button cards, and now these as well, and that's how we are dealing with this. And that's just another way of creating some buttons using packaging and a few artistic applications, and lo and behold we've got something really special, something that we can enjoy and put onto other things within the journal. You can of course use nail varnish instead of a glaze, and you would be able to get some pearlescent interesting buttons, maybe some shell pink or some white pearl buttons. That could be really nice and easily achieved with nail varnish you no longer need or use. Okay, so there we go, that's the project. I hope that was fun for you. You've learnt something there and you'd like to go away and make some of your own cards for your journals. Do please have a look for the digital kit, and you can print that out for free. There are 3 other designs here. There's one for more of a nature journal and this lovely Art Deco feel, and I just had the idea that this could be put on the front of a little booklet and then you open it out and the buttons are inside, so that could be another interesting thing that we do. Then we've got this, and these felt like a real 50s, 1950s, 1960s vibe, and then some buttons to punch out. These work quite nicely with a 3/4 inch punch or smaller, and that is what you can go and download, and that is a little gift from me to you. So thank you very much for your patience on the button video, and I hope that that was fun. So do please like and subscribe to the channel if you found some fun and value here, and above everything else just slow down and make crafting time for you. Bye bye now.